Welcome to Inspiring People, the show about inspiring people, those who are inspired and those who inspire others. We all know them. They're good examples, they're supportive, they embrace life, they live inspiring lives in their day-to-day actions, and in turn, inspire others to do the same. Hi, welcome to Inspiring People. My name is Mary Otto. I'm the host of the show, and with me today is Dr. Carlos Torres. Welcome to the show, Carlos.
Thank you, Mary.
It's just great to have you here, and I know that everybody watching the show will find you to be a truly inspiring person. I'm going to do something a little bit out of the ordinary for the interview. I am going to start by reading something that was written about Carlos at one time, and we'll talk about who wrote it and why after I'm done reading it. But this will give you a little bit of an idea about who this man is before we even talk to him. This is written in first person, so this isn't me speaking, this is the author speaking. I had the opportunity to attend a gala reception on Friday evening. The room was decorated in red, white, and blue. Intricate jazz background music was provided by a talented local keyboard artist. A table was laden with delicate hors d'oeuvres and rich pastries. The focal point of the conversation, however, was the unique shirt worn by the guest of honor. One side had bright red, white, and blue stripes. The other side was navy blue dotted with many small white stars. The small man with twinkling eyes inside the shirt was grinning with happiness and pride. That day, Carlos had stood before a judge and had become a United States citizen. Why had he made this decision to take this oath? Carlos was born in a small, poor village in El Salvador, and he grew up in an environment of poverty. Sometimes he had no shoes, but he would sit barefoot, escaping reality in the celluloid world of American movies. The heroes, such as John Wayne and Marlon Brando, were idolized by youngsters like himself. These heroes became his idols, and American lifestyles portrayed in the films became a dream to achieve. The United States was a country of opportunity. If one had intelligence and worked hard, his potential would be developed in America. There was no such opportunity in El Salvador. From watching these movies, the youngsters felt that they too could be Americans and would play at it by pretending to speak English. The ability to speak English was considered a great achievement. Carlos was fortunate to be able to go to Mexico City to study at the National Autonomous University to become a doctor. He then spent a few years in Canada and the United States to further his training. In Canada, he met and married his wife, Colleen. They went to El Salvador for 2 years so that Carlos could obtain his medical license in this country. Carlos loved his country, and Colleen learned to love it too. There had been much progress made in his absence since San Salvador, the capital, had become truly cosmopolitan with many high schools established by a variety of foreign countries. Many of their friends were members of the Peace Corps. Carlos and Colleen felt that these special people must have been handpicked to represent the United States. They had certainly represented everything good about America. These people and their civil spirit reinforced the positive feeling Carlos had about America and its people. There had been some political unrest, but it came to an head in 1979 when Humberto Romero was ousted from the office by Army officers. In spite of an attempt to reinforce the government, protests continued and the war erupted between the government and the rebel leftist guerrilla forces. The earlier progress came to an abrupt halt, and the war-torn country became even more poverty-stricken. Everyone who could leave the country did so. Carlos stayed. He loved his country and felt he should stay to help his country work against the infiltration of communism. There's a strong feeling for democracy by the people in El Salvador, exemplified by the high percentage of people who vote in elections. He and his family learned to live day to day with rebel attacks. Bombings would often result in loss of water and electricity for a few days at a time. When guerrillas began kidnapping young people, either for ransom or to obtain as guerrillas, Carlos and Colleen made the difficult decision to send their older daughter to live in Canada with her grandparents. This decision was their biggest loss of war. As unrest continued and the conditions became more dangerous, Carlos finally realized that he could do his country no good if he were dead. After 10 years of hoping the situation would improve, he arose one morning with his decision that it was time for them to leave. They returned to Canada, where Colleen was a citizen, but Carlos still held on to America as his dream. To him, the United States was had the most freedoms. As Colleen had a United States heritage, she was easily granted citizenship, and they emigrated to the United States. Soon after emigrating, Carlos joined the reserves, and in joining the reserves was a way for him to returning to his country all it had done for him. He was also recalled from the movies of his youth, the American soldiers of World War II. They had been seen as heroes defending their country and democracy. He observed that a notable number of soldiers in the reserves were immigrants from the third world country. To all of them, democracy is an ideal worth defending. Well, this is the first part of this note about Carlos, this article about Carlos. And I think now we'll begin the interview, and then I'll share with you some other parts of this this wonderful story of Carlos as it was written by this woman. So, okay, Carlos, I hope people now have a bit of an idea about you already before we even get started.
Sure.
So let's just begin like I do every other one now, every other interview, and ask you to say your full name.
My full name is Carlos Torres.
Okay, no middle name, right?
No middle name.
No middle name. And Carlos, where are you from? There was a reference to it in that piece I read, but why don't you tell the viewers where you're from?
I'm from El Salvador, in Central America. I've been living in this country for almost 30 years, and now I'm an American citizen.
Well, congratulations. So, Carlos, tell us just a little bit, give people maybe an idea about where El Salvador is located.
El Salvador is located south of Mexico. We are neighbor to Guatemala, to Honduras, and to Nicaragua. We have ocean side with the Pacific, but not the Atlantic. And then follow Costa Rica and Panama. That's where El Salvador is located. It's very little country. We speak Spanish, and we are Latinos, of course.
Mm-hmm. And so, how long did you live in El Salvador?
I practiced medicine in El Salvador for 10 years.
Okay. So you grew up there, you left for a while and then went back,
I was born and raised in El Salvador, and then I went to medical school in Mexico City, and then had my postgraduate training in the United States and Canada, and then I came back and practiced medicine for 10 years in El Salvador.
Okay, so you went back and practiced there as well.
Yes.
How about your family there, your mother and father, brother and sisters? Do you want to say anything about them?
Sure. My family is really a small family. I grew up, my childhood, I was with my grandparents.
Oh, okay.
So we lived in a very small town in El Salvador, and with at extreme poverty. So along with me, there were other 3 cousins that my grandparents were raising too. Too, because their mother died, and my mother was somewhere looking for food for us.
Oh, okay.
So I didn't see my mother until I was 5 years old, and I knew we would survive because he was sending money for us to eat.
Well, okay, that's really, we'll need to pick up on that part of the story, okay, in part 2 of our interviews. So join us next week for part 2 of my interview with Dr. Carlos Torres.